It's truly amazing to see so many young minds able to revel in the glory of the one and only Dr. Vernon Johnson Mwaanga. Good morning, Dr. Mwaanga.
Good morning.
On behalf of all the schools here, Italian School of Lusaka, the Rhodes Park School, and of course St Ignatius College, which you had the initiative of helping to establish when it was called the Leopards Hill High School, I would like to truly give you all the gratitude for giving us the ability to learn from you today.
Thank you. You're more than welcome.
As we begin to commemorate this year's Heroes and Unity Day, we believed it was imperative that we could listen to a true hero of Zambia and all the things that he was able to do. Looking at your extensive career in diplomacy, being able to be the Deputy High Commissioner to London, being an ambassador to the Soviet Union in such a turbulent time, it's truly evident to see that you are truly accomplished in this sense. And I'm sure a lot of people who want to take up the role of diplomacy look to you as a true icon of the role in Zambia. Now, we would like to just talk about amazing topics today such as democracy, diplomacy, African solidarity, as well as the future of Zambia. For us to do this, let's go into our first segment that focuses on your youth and how you were able to go into this profession in Zambia.
It's a pleasure for me to have you here. I'm very attached to young people because I assumed leadership at a very young age. I used to listen to my dad, who was also a teacher and became president of the Northern Rhodesia African Teachers Association, talk to his cousin, Mr. Hari Mwaanga Nkumbola, who was the first president of the African National Congress. Each time he visited my dad's house in Livoyu, in Livingston, which is where I grew up. They discussed not just politics, but they discussed also issues relating to the future of our country. It is evident from their discussions that they wanted our country to be free. Many of you will not know that before independence, the discrimination which we, the black people of this country, experienced was unbelievable. We could not enter hotels like Ridgeway Hotel, Lusaka Hotel, Edinburgh Hotel, New Savoy Hotel. We could not enter departmental shops today, which can be equated to ShopRite. You had to buy whatever you wanted through a window, a side window. We couldn't enter chemists. You had to buy your medicine through the side windows. Residential houses were segregated. And if you take Lusaka, where we are now, the blacks used to live in Matero, Chilenje, and Kabwata. The round huts in Kabwata, some of the old ones are still being kept there for historical purposes. The university teaching hospital, as you know it today, was also segregated. At that time, it was called Lusaka Central Hospital. It became University Teaching Hospital only after we established the University of Zambia in 1966, 67 going forward. Each time Mr. Nkumbola visited my dad in Livoyu in Livingston, the following day, white policemen came to our house and searched our house at 4 in the morning. They woke us up as children, searched under our mattresses, under our pillows. They searched every drawer. And they always carried the search warrant which read, "Looking for seditious material." And it happened the first day. The next time it happened, I asked the children in the neighborhood, the ones we used to play with, "Have the police been to your house?" And they said no. I said, so I decided to ask my dad, why is it that the police come here after Uncle Harry has been here? No? What are you and him doing? So my dad says, don't worry. They can come here, to use his words, 1 million times. I won't blink, not even a bit. What your uncle and I are discussing is that we want your generation to govern this country. We don't want those white policemen who keep waking us up at 4 in the morning to stay here. We want them to go back to England where they came from. We want your generation to take over the country and govern our country. So I slowly began to take an interest in what was happening. And when my time came to join active politics, to the disappointment of my father and my uncle Harry, I did not join through the African National Congress, which was Uncle Harry's party. I joined through the United National Independence Party, UNIP, which was through Dr. Kaunda's party. They were together when they were elected in 1952. The first African National Congress conference to elect leaders was held in 1952. They elected Mr. Nkumbula as president, Dr. Kaunda as secretary general. They continued under that arrangement until 1958, when some younger members of the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress, the more radical wing of the African National Congress, or ANC as we knew it, the Mansaka Pwepwes, the Kamangas, Ruben Kamangas, the Justin Chimbas, the Naumino Mundias, the Scotta Winners, and others decided that the ANC was not radical enough against colonial rule. They decided to break away from the African National Congress in 1958 to pursue a much more aggressive approach towards colonialism. And as misfortune would have it, the then governor of Northern Rhodesia, who was representing the British government, Sir Arthur Benson was his name. He decided on the orders of the colonial secretary in London, who was called Ian MacLeod, banned the group which had broken away from the ANC and formed another party called Zambia African National Congress, ZANC. He banned ZANC on grounds that it was too radical. The leaders were arrested, put in jail, and some were sent into detention camps. In various parts of the country, Dr. Kaunda was sent in detention in Northwestern Province. But before the leaders were sent to the various rural places, the colonial authorities spread rumors using messengers in the villages that these leaders who were going to be detained there were criminals and that there were people they should not come near to, otherwise they would get killed. You know. They spread very negative language about the leaders. But it didn't take long for the people to find out that that was not true. So while they were in prisons or in detention, Mainza Chona, who had been studying law in England, and you probably know that he became the first black lawyer in this country, in Northern Rhodesia, decided to form another party which was called ANIP, UNP. He also worked with another person who was based in Kabwe, who became interim secretary general, and Mainza Chona became interim president, which was called United National Party. And he carried on the work of ZANC, of the leaders who had been detained. When the leaders were freed in 1959, Mainza Chona called a meeting of all the leaders who had been freed from detention and other leaders and said to them, I'm only warming this seat for for Dr. Kaunda. I'm handing over the presidency of ANIP to Dr. Kaunda, which he did. And the party was then renamed UNIP as we know it today, as it continues to be known even today. So I joined UNIP, and to the disappointment of my parents, my father in particular, because UNIP had more radical ideas against colonialism. And because of this experience I had seen of blacks being prevented from doing everything, education was segregated, health segregated, housing, even the railway system was segregated. As a black person, you could buy a third-class ticket or fourth-class ticket. The first-class ticket and second-class ticket were reserved for white people. I said I'm joining UNIP because UNIP's views are identical with mine. I want a radical approach against colonial rule. I don't want colonialism to be treated with soft gloves. My father was very disappointed, so was my uncle Harry, but my mother supported me. And we had a house divided, husband and wife, one against, one in favor. And my father did not talk to me for the next 3 years because of that political difference that I had with him. Then when I was joining UNIP, I went to see Mwaanga Chona first, and I said to him I wanted to become part of the struggle. His main concern was that I came from a family which was considered well-to-do, and he said, how are you going to manage, because there is no money in this struggle. You come from a family, your father is headmaster, your mother is a teacher, your father is president of the Northern Rhodesia African Teachers Association. How are you going to manage? I said, how are you managing? I'll manage the way all the others are managing. I've made up my mind that I must make a contribution to the struggle. The young people have a duty also to contribute something. So he said, well, that's very clear. So he took me to Dr. Kaunda's office. I met Dr. Kaunda in 1960, and I told him I wanted to join the struggle permanently and full-time, and that I was ready to accept whatever responsibilities they wanted to give me. He was also of the view, like Mwaanga Chona, that I wouldn't manage because I came from a family which was considered well-to-do. I said, no, forget about that. I joined the struggle because I want to make a contribution. I want the young people of this country to make a contribution. I said, I listen to radio broadcasts. I hear people fighting for independence in Ghana, Nigeria, in Guinea, in Tanzania, in Kenya, in Uganda. Why shouldn't we fight for our independence? So they said, okay, come back in 2 weeks, we'll find something for you to do. I went back after 2 weeks, and I was appointed provincial chair for youth of UNIP in Southern Province. The headquarters at that time was in Monze. So I was sent to Monze, and I worked with other colleagues who I found there. And then in 1962, well, first of all, 1961, there was a general conference of UNIP held in Kabwe, Mulungushi Rock. And there, the radical group of UNIP, of which I was a part, which was called the Casablanca Group because of its radical views. The Casablanca Group, because of the fact that before the Organization of African Unity was formed in May 1963, there were two informal groups which existed on the continent. The Casablanca Group was the more radical wing, comprising countries like Ghana, Guinea, Mali, Egypt, Kenya, Tanzania, and others. Then there was the Monrovia Group, which was considered the less radical wing, comprising countries like Liberia at that time, comprising countries like Senegal, like Tunisia, like Sudan, and a number of other countries. So our group was called the Casablanca Group, very radical wing of UNIP. We wanted to introduce what was then called a master plan, which in the local languages is called, we called it cha-cha-cha. I'm sure a number of you have even seen a road behind Cairo Road called Cha-cha-cha Road. That was named after that same master plan that we had talked about. Well, we proposed that there should be a master plan which should be more radical against colonialism, and that we should change leadership at the central committee level by having elections to bring in new leaders. The central committee leaders didn't want any elections to be held, and as misfortune would have it, Mr. Chikwanda and myself went to the platform where the chairman of the conference was. The chairman was called Mr. Solomon Kalulu. We grabbed the microphone from him and we asked 1,200 delegates, "Do you want elections?" They all shouted in unison, "Yes!" We said, "You see, you leaders, you are misleading. You are misreading what the people want. They want elections." So elections had to be forced on the leadership. And some of the leaders were dropped and new ones elected into the Central Committee. And the master plan, which was a lot more radical, was then introduced. And Dr. Kaunda, who, as you know, was a disciple of Nehru, of Gandhi, and Nehru, who believed in non-violence. And they also, he believed in peaceful campaigns and so on. We felt that the colonial office was not getting enough pressure to be able to bring about the changes which we wanted to see for the people of Northern Rhodesia at that time. So reluctantly, he went along with us, and the colonialists realized that the cha-cha-cha was bringing a lot of tension in the country. It led to a few deaths, and a few colonial buildings had been attacked and burnt. And Ian MacLeod decided that he was going to call a constitutional conference in London in 1962 to discuss the future of Northern Rhodesia. The future of Northern Rhodesia. So as UNIP, we went to that conference, and ANC, there was also a party called the Liberal Party. The president of the Liberal Party, Dr. Guy Scott, is the father of the Guy Scott who became vice president of our country. They were supportive of our struggle. Then you have the United Federal Party, which was the oppressor's party, which was supporting colonialism. And then they asked a few chiefs to attend that conference. And one of the chiefs who attended was a brother-in-law of mine who was married to my sister, called Chief Mapanza. Maurice Katoa was one of those better educated chiefs. The colonialists picked him and another chief to go and represent the chiefs. The conference in London was a bit chaotic initially, but there was some agreement after MacLeod introduced a constitution, which I'm sure you have probably read about in your studies, called the 15-15-15, the MacLeod Constitution. 15 seats on the upper row for whites, 15 seats on the lower row for blacks, 15 seats on the middle row for both. We were not very happy about it in UNIP, but we agreed that we would go along with it. It represented a step forward. We came back home, and I represented the youth at that conference, and we came back and decided that we would participate in the election, which we did as UNIP. And come the results, out of the 15 seats on the lower row, UNIP won 13 seats, 1-3. The African National Congress won 2. On the middle row, UNIP won 7 seats, which then gave us 20. And on the upper row, the white row, we won 2 seats. That gave us 22 seats. 15, 15, 15 is 45. To win an absolute majority, you needed 23 seats. We won 22 seats. ANC won 5 on the lower row. They won 2 on the lower row and 3 on the mixed row to make 5. The UFP won a few seats and far from the benchmark of 23 seats. So both UNIP and the UFP, United Federal Party, needed the African National Congress seats, the 5 seats. They became very attractive brides for the parties, because without them, you wouldn't form a government. UNIP was short of 1 seat to form a majority, UFP several seats. So we said, well, how are we going to approach the ANC? And there was a debate going on within UNIP as to what we should do. And finally, it was decided, I went to President Kaunda myself, and I said, I'd like to suggest to you that I should go and visit Uncle Harry at his house, not to negotiate anything, just to get the feel of which way he's leaning to. He said, young man, that's a very good idea. By the way, Dr. Kaunda always called me young man up to the time he died, when I was already an old man as well. But he always called me young man. He said, young man, that's a very good idea. So he gave me 50 pounds to get into a taxi, and I went to Uncle Harry's house. The workers knew me, and they said, oh, you came to see your uncle today? I said, yes. So I said, come in. So I went into the living room, and there was a white man sitting there. I didn't pay much attention at first, and then when I looked at him, I recognized him. It was a man called John Roberts. He was the president of the United Federal Party in Northern Rhodesia. I said, oh my God, I hope it's not what I'm thinking. He must have come for this same coalition issue which UNIP also is interested in. Then he stood up and greeted me, introduced me himself. My name is John Roberts. I said, yes, Mr. Roberts, I know you. You are the leader of the United Federal Party. He said, oh, you know that? I said, yes. So we chatted a bit. And I noticed that he was carrying a big briefcase beside him, on the side of his chair. Those briefcases which the doctors carry, where they carry medicine. So I said, oh my God. Then they told him, Mr. Nkumbula is ready to see you now. So they took him into to his office, and he carried the bag with him. So I waited, they gave me a drink, I waited, and I timed that meeting very nervously, and it lasted 45 minutes. I saw Mr. Roberts going out, he came to say goodbye to me, and then he went out. And after 5 minutes, they said to me, your uncle will see you now. So I went into the office, I knocked, he said, come in. So I said, good afternoon, Uncle Harry. He said, good afternoon, my dear nephew. How are you? I said, no, I'm fine. And how are you? He said, no, I'm fine. I know why you are here. That was the first thing he said to me. I said, I haven't even opened my mouth. How do you know what I've come for? I said, I came to greet you. He said, no, I know why you're here. Sit down. So I sat down. So he said, do you think that, did you see that white man who was here? I said, yes. Do you know him? I said, yes. That's John Roberts. He said, did you see the bag he was carrying? I said, yes, this bag. I noticed he was carrying the bag and he left without it. He said, yes, this is the bag. He brought this money with a view to bribing me to agree to form a coalition government with the United Federal Party. I'm not going to do it. I cannot betray the people of this country by agreeing to go into a coalition government with the oppressor party. That's the party that is oppressing the blacks. I said, well, I'm very happy to hear that. He said, as bad as some of you people in UNIP are, go and tell Kenneth. He used to call him by his first name all the time. Go and tell Kenneth that I am prepared to form a coalition government with you, with UNIP. I was so happy. I got up, I was about to go, and he said, not so fast. So I sat for a little while, and he said, well, the members have got a saying that it's called Sangwapo. You have been found when money is being shared to you. So I will also give you some of it, you know. But please ask him to tell Elijah Mdenda and Scott Awina to come to my house within the next 2 days so that we can discuss how the portfolios in government are going to be shared. You know. I said, I'll do that. So he picked a bunch of that money and gave it to me. He didn't count it. And for me, I was not so interested in the money. It is the news about him agreeing to form a coalition government with UNIP, which I was more interested in. But I counted the money anyway. Later, I found that it was £1,700 because in those days we were using British pounds, as you know. We used British pounds until 3 or 4 years after independence. We are still using British pounds here in Zambia. So I rushed to Dr. Kaonda's house, and when I got there, I found him in a meeting. So I told the people to let him know that I had arrived, and he then told the people I was with to leave, and he asked me to go in. So he said, young man, I can see a smile on your face. I said, yes, sir. He said, what is it? I said, no, I'm the bearer of good news. He says, look, is this a joke or something? I said, Mr. President, when have I ever joked with you? Have I ever had a joke with you as my party president? I said, I cannot come and joke with you. It's serious. He said, okay, what happened? So I related the conversation, and I said, he's willing to have a conversation with you, but he wants to form a coalition government with UNIP, that you should send Elijah Mdenda and Scott Awina to go and discuss how the portfolio should be shared in government. He then hugged me and said, you don't know what you've done for us and for the country. We didn't know how to approach Mr. Nkumbula after what had happened in the elections, where we said bad things about each other. You know? And you know what happens during political campaigns. Those are the things which happen. So he said, oh my God, this is very good news. And he called Elijah Mdenda and briefed them, and I also talked to them and explained what had happened. They went there after 2 days, and they agreed on how the portfolio should be shared. The following day, the two leaders met. And then the next day, the leaders addressed a joint press conference together to announce that they are going to form a coalition government.
Wow, wow.
Mr. Nkumbula became Minister of Education. Dr. Kaonda became Minister of Local Government. And Mr. Kamanga became Minister of Agriculture. And Scott Awina became Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Local Government to Dr. Kaonda. And that's how the internal self-government began its journey. Coalition governments are not easy because you have people with different programs, different manifestos, different policies. But come January 1964, we pressed for new elections based on what was called one man, one vote. The language was a bit gender insensitive in those days. It was one man, one vote, meaning universal adult suffrage. That every person who had reached the age of 18 or 21 at that time, the voting age, should be allowed to vote regardless, woman, male. 21. The first election was based on educational qualification. They must have done at least standard 4 to be able to vote at that time. But we said no, we wanted universal adult suffrage, one man, one vote. Fresh elections were held, and one man, one vote, and it was then decided that they should be in January, and UNIP won a great majority of the seats and formed a government on its own, January 1964. And Dr. Kaunda became Prime Minister. The position changed from local government to Prime Minister, and he appointed ministers who served under his administration. And that arrangement continued until midnight, 23rd going to 24th of October 1964, when his title then changed from Prime Minister to President. So during that journey, Dr. Kaunda saw some potential in me as a young man. He had asked me to represent him at conferences. One conference in Sweden, Swedish Socialist Union, to address the Swedish Socialist Union, which was the governing party. And I found Rupiah Banda was a student there at that time that I went, and he was representing UNIP together with another man called Emmanuel Chalavesa. And they met me at the airport when I arrived, and they were there when I addressed the Congress. He also sent me to Indonesia to attend a meeting of the non-aligned countries. And he sent me to Ghana and Nigeria, and then to Egypt and to Ethiopia. I had been to 9 countries already before independence came in October 1964. He saw some potential in me, and I also had a feeling that I should perform my duties diligently as a young person, because if I didn't, it would disadvantage young people in future from being appointed to positions of responsibility.
That's very true. And Dr. Mwaanga, I feel the story you've just told us even shows how your relationship with Dr. Kaunda really came about. And we know you served as his permanent secretary from 1966 to 68. And you're by his side when there were meetings with OAU leaders and Commonwealth leaders. And it really shows just how useful a young mind can be to Zambian policy. And I'm sure these young minds on the panel actually have some questions for you in your youth and how you're able to do that. Just so we can recuperate and start these questions properly, we're going to take a small break and then continue into our questions.